spend some time talking about a future communication technology. Augie has already touched on this a bit, but we'll go into more depth. It follows up also on some of the questions that were raised yesterday about holographs and demand for higher data rates in the future. And we'll definitely talk about that a bit. We'll be a little more technical than we have so far in the past, and I'll try to show some videos that will illustrate it. You remember this from yesterday and from countless presentations that I made over the years about the growth in bandwidth performance and the various generations that have come about. Right now, we're pretty much in sort of the 300 megabits per second to 1 gigabit per second generation, where most people have at least 300 megabits per second at home, and a few of us now have a gigabit per second. But very few of us are now subscribing to more than that. But if we follow the logical progression, a multi-gig service will be coming out as a leading edge in a few years, and ultimately, as we close the end of the decade, we'll be seeing the 10 gigabit service be introduced to be commonplace. And from a forecasting perspective, there's kind of two things that I look at these for. One is, will this happen to deliver the bandwidth that people are going to want? In other words, sort of the growth in demand that we've seen for decades now in terms of bandwidth, will that continue? And then will it be made available, A, and then will people want it, B? And that's always been the challenge here from going back to the early 90s when we first started forecasting this, was, will the bandwidth be available, and B, will it be useful? And this is critical for these types of forecasts, because this comes up every technology, when we look at any technology improvement curve, whether it's Moore's Law, whether it's data rates on fiber optics, any type of speed of planes, anything. A performance improvement will continue as long as it is A, technically feasible, and B, useful. So there are two ways of looking at the problem. Is 10K going to be useful? Or the other way of the problem is, are there applications out there that need 10K and will drive it? 10G. Huh? 10G. 10G. Actually, either way. 10G service, exactly. Thank you. 10K is something different. And the rate may change, by the way, if the technology approach changes. But that rate of change has been driven by the same basic set of technologies. So we think that will probably stay the same and keep going as long as it's useful. So one key thing, if we're talking about communications, a lot of communications is video. As we're seeing right now with sharing our presence with a number of people that are online via video and of course audio. So and I want to focus here more on communications than just TVs. And so, but since so much of communications is video, we can't talk about it without talking about the TV resolutions. And so this is exactly the slide I showed you yesterday with the generations of different definitions of television and the bandwidths. And so right now we're very much in the 4K generation in terms of what most of us have and are using. As we go toward the end of the decade, we'll see more of the 8K technology being adopted. And I agree that right now Augie is right that 8K is primarily on the production side and the film side. But I think the fact is the reality will be just like it was with HD and with 4K. We're going to see the 8K in our displays as well. Particularly if you look at the trend in display size, the average right now is almost 50 inches. And that trend is going up, so it'll probably be 60 or 70 inches by the end of the decade. So we got that. So what I want to think about now is, since we're projecting the next generation of the multi-gig and 10K being toward the end of the decade, and we're looking at 8K toward the end of the decade, I want to put our thinking caps on about what's going to happen between now and the end of the decade. So we're not talking about what's going to happen maybe this year or next year or the year after, but what the continuity is going to be as we go from now till about 10 years out. First, this is the slide that Augie showed, just a little simpler version, but it shows basically the pixel counts as we go from HDTV, UHTV to 8K. Basically quadrupling every time you go to a next generation. And now we're going to talk about how that translates into data rates. And this sounds like it's going to get technical, but actually all we're going to be relying on is your grade school math. All you really need to do to understand these things is multiply. So if you look at the, if you multiply horizontal pixels, in other words, how many dots there are across horizontally by the vertical pixels, and then you multiply that by the number of bits that are required for each pixel to make the color and the intensity. And it's usually think about it as being 8 bits. 8 bits will give you 256 intensities. You have 3 colors, so 8 times 3 is 24. So we have mostly 24 bits. Now there is 9 and 10-bit color as well. And so in that case, you instead of having 24 bits per pixel, you might have more, but that'd be typical. Another key factor is frame rate. Most of the standards for coding this stuff has not variable frame rates, but choices of frame rates. So it could be 24, it could be 30, it could be 60, it could be 120. Typical would be 30 frames per second, which is basically the TV standard. And then you multiply that by what I'll call depth. If this picture has any type of 3D to it, you might have to have a depth factor. That's going to come in more with the holographs. So kind of assume that's 1 by now, for now. And then there's also how many lenses you're using. In other words, how many different pictures you have. And that would be multiplied again. So if you had 2 lenses, you'd multiply by 2. So it's pixels horizontal, pixels verticals, times bits per pixel, times depth, times lens. That gives you a big number. And then you divide by, if you're doing gigabits per second, you'll divide by 1 billion, and that'll give you the gigabits per second. That's the raw signal required to send this picture. And so for HDTV, just general video, that comes to about a gigabit and a half, just for regular HDTV. But we get to compress it. And that's where it gets mathematical and complicated and highly technical. But the compression allows us to actually fit these huge data streams into something that we can send over a network. A typical recommended compression ratio for just general video is 50 to 1. And so we can take that 1.5 gigabit signal, get it down to 50 ratio, and get it down to 30 megabits per second. Basically divide the raw rate by the compression ratio. Bingo, we got it. So with 4K TV, the multiplications on the second row there, we have a higher horizontal and vertical pixels, keep everything else the same. We get to 6 gigabits per second, okay? But then we can compress that down to about 119 megabits per second. So kind of within the range of what we can do now. For 8K, just kind of, we go up on the horizontal and vertical pixels, and we get to about almost half a gigabit, 500 megabits per second. Again, that's compressed. So even compressed, those raw rates of what you would just do with general video are pretty high. Now, Netflix is already providing 4K TV, and they're not using anything like 119 megabits per second per channel. They're closer to maybe 15 megabits per channel. So what's the disconnect here? The answer is Netflix and services like Netflix, the other streaming people, they use like compression technologies that have much higher compression ratio, and they customize those things, the compression, and they do it offline, not in real time. And since they're doing it offline, not in real time, and they're customizing the compression for actually the source even, whether it's, depending on the type of movie it is, they get much higher compression ratios. It seems to be, just doing the math, they're getting compression ratios of 400 to 1. And so that's how they can get to 4 and 15 and maybe 60 for HK and delivered over today's broadband. So this gives you some idea about how we get there for even just simple basic video. When we start talking about holograms, it's going to get a little more complicated. So let's talk about the new visualization and communication technologies and where we are now. So what we're doing in this conference would be an example of using technology and video and broadband communications in a fairly sophisticated way to have a meeting, communicate, to be together as people. We did it even more so when we were all strictly online for the last two conferences. We got a feel for what I'm talking about communication and visualization over a distance. But there are some technologies that are intended to make it more real. And this is a list of some of them. There's virtual reality, which generally we're talking about, headsets. There's augmented reality, which may or may not include, glasses. There are immersion rooms, which are more like multiple screens, if you will. And then there are things that give us a much more presence, like the holograph, which can either be glasses or displays or immersion rooms. And what we're going to do is just work through these, give you an idea what each of them are, and I'm sure when you'll do the same thing that I do and what Augie does and so forth, when we look at these, we'll form our own opinions about which will probably be the most likely to succeed. We'll have positive and negative feelings about some of them, but I'd like to give you an idea about what each of them are. I don't need to sit down all the time for this. So let's start with VR. It's a digital environment that replaces the user's real world. And with VR, what we're generally thinking about is immersion. So we're covered, our face is covered, we have the deep immersive experience, but because our face is covered, nobody can see our face. And so we have to use avatars or of some type or another to have our own presence. And so there's the various ways of looking at this, but one way to think about meetings would be something like what Facebook and Zuckerberg, have in mind with the metaverse. And so we'll play an ad. It's about a year old or so of what his vision of the metaverse is. And I'd like you to think about it not so much in the context of gaming and so forth, but in the context of meeting and sharing experience with other people. It could be in a business setting, although this is more of a gaming setting. So we're going to roll the video on, for those here in the studio audience, we're going to roll it on the screen to the left.
Imagine you put on your glasses or headset and you're instantly in your home space. It has parts of your physical home recreated virtually, it has things that are only possible virtually, and it has an incredibly inspiring view of whatever you find most beautiful.
Hey, are you coming?
Yeah, just gotta find something to wear. All right, perfect.
Boy.
Oh, hey, Mark. Hey, what's going on?
Hi.
Mark. What's up, Mark?
Whoa, we're floating in space?
Uh-huh.
Who made this place? It's awesome.
Right? It's from a crater I met in LA.
This place is amazing.
Boz, is that you?
Of course it's me. You know I had to be the robot, man.
I thought I was supposed to be the robot.
Whoa.
I knew you were bluffing.
Hey, wait. Where is Naomi?
Let's call her.
Naomi.
Hey, should we deal you in?
Hey, sorry I'm running late, but you've got to see what we're checking out. There's an artist going around Soho hiding AR pieces for people to find.
3D street art? That's cool.
Send that link over so we can all look at it. This is stunning.
Okay, that is something.
That's awesome.
I love the movement.
Wait, it's disappearing.
This is amazing.
Hold on. I'll tip the artist and they'll extend it.
Wow. Brilliant.
If you guys like it here, I have another room that you're gonna love. Check out this forest room.
Huh, let's see it.
Koi fish that fly? That's new.
This is wild. Hey, one sec, Boz. It's Priscilla.
Hey, you have to see this. Beast is going crazy.
Oh, I love that guy. We've got to show that to the kids. Can you also send that to my dad?
I'll message him.
All right, see you at home. This place is great, Boz, but there's something I got to get back to. All right, so that's a glimpse of a few ways that we're going to be able to get together and socialize in the metaverse.
And this is just a demo from a camera. This is like a 360-degree camera shot. And what's cool is this is VR, but we can, by clicking the little arrows on the circle here, you can get a 360-degree view of the scene that's being filmed. And we actually had this in our conference about 5 years ago, where we had a little 360 camera right in the middle, and you could people in the remote audience, if they had the bandwidth, could actually look around the conference room. And we may see something like that in this class or this conference in the future. But the idea is that the user, because the camera is showing everything, the remote user in this case can look and see what they want to. And then you can think about if this were a little like a robot with the camera mounted on instead of this person, you could actually wander around the conference room or the venue and see your own pictures. So you kind of get the idea. This is actually a review for the camera. So this is a typical virtual reality camera. There are really two of them here. The one on the left is kind of more high production quality one, where it has 6 different fisheye lenses that are looking simultaneously in all different directions. And then the one to the right is a smaller handheld one that the guy in the video was actually carrying around that has cameras front and back with fisheye lenses and somehow manages to capture with just 2, the front and back. And then software kind of translates that into a 360-degree picture. So for virtual reality, you think about these kind of cameras, they're basically video cameras with multiple lenses, and some of them also have a 3D option where instead of just taking a single photo in each direction, it takes 2 slightly offset photos in each direction so that you can have a dimension of 3-dimensionality wherever you're looking, in addition to the 360-degree rotation of the camera. So if you look at the specs of these things, they have video formats are at least HD. If you want 3D, it'll be almost 4,000 by 4,000. For 2D, it'll be standard 4K. But then they also have a 8K options as well. So we'll start about thinking about the amount of bandwidth required to run these. If, for example, you were running a 6-lens camera. Well, first let's talk about the 1-lens requirement. The first row here is the 4K, assuming 3D, and so the math comes out to about 425 megabits per second compressed. If we're talking about 8K, we get out to 849 megabits per second, or almost a gig compressed. But that's just one lens. If we multiply it by 6 lenses for the full-fledged, high quality 360, for the 4K, we're talking about almost 2.5 gigs. For the 8K, we're talking about 5 gigs. Now this is coming off the camera, but it's also what you'd have to transmit to get it from, say, this conference room to somebody's desktop remotely, with a pretty healthy 50%, 50-to-1 compression rate. So now for something just like the video feed off this conference in VR in high quality, the quality we have now, and then also in the future HK, we're now talking about getting into gigabits, multiple gigabits. We're still under 10 gigabits, but we're getting to where we're definitely going to need 10 gigabit service to do that. So now we're beginning to see some pretty useful applications that are getting into that multiple gigabit speeds without going holographic or anything. Now, exactly the format we do this in, we saw two different paradigms. One, the second paradigm was more a telepresence here, but just not, and it would be immersive, could be an immersive experience for somebody in the audience because they can look around, but we're not wearing VR headsets. The other is the more Zuckerberg paradigm with metaverse, where we basically lose our visual identity and we become avatars. Now the avatar his had was pretty cartoonish, but they can also make avatars that are very realistic. It'll look like, you know, Ruben sitting there in the audience, but it's not Ruben. It's a picture of him that's been animated by, you know, AI and so forth to make us be almost like him. Now, to me, that gets super spooky, but some people that's not spooky. I prefer, I think, maybe a fake avatar like the one we saw in the video. Moving on. This is just a similar chart that I found in the, just doing some research about what the technology people are calculating with different types of VR. And so the extreme VR, which was getting kind of to what I was showing the calculation for with a 4K resolution, they were calculating for a smooth play 1 gigabit per second, and for interactive 2 and 0.35 gigabit per second. So again, we're getting into those speeds where you want at least multiple gig and preferably 10 gig. So kind of just some confirmation of the calculations I showed you. Now let's move to augmented reality. Here, as Augie said, you have a digital overlay over some type of real world. And there are different ways to implement this. The most common one that we see is using the augmented reality glasses. Now, the augmented reality glasses have the advantage of we're able to see our face. It's like you can see my face even though I'm wearing some pince nez, and these glasses will get better over time. So that's a nice part of the AR, in my mind, is we don't lose our individuality. We don't need an avatar, but we can still get some of the illusional effects of the AR. So here's one vision of how this might look.
What if there was a better way to collaborate? A better way to build and work together? A way that brought us closer, as if we were sitting next to each other, face to face. What if our creativity could burst to life in the space around us? Spatial is a collective computing environment that lets teams visualize their thoughts in the room around them.
Hi, Mike. Hey, Jeff. How's it going?
So whether you're on a desktop computer or scribbling notes on your phone, all your digital devices are seamlessly tied together into an infinite workspace. You can manifest your ideas before your eyes by just saying them, and in a click, expand them with the power of all the world's information. Using augmented reality's infinite canvas, pixels become tactile, letting you manipulate them like clay.
Hey, buddy.
We believe digital and physical worlds should live in harmony together. You can sketch ideas out on paper, or have them exist digitally. Spatial brings people and ideas together into a single shared environment, letting us work together in profound new ways. So whether your teams are spread around the world, or you're exploring new worlds, whether you're in a fancy AR headset, or connecting from a regular PC, anybody can join the conversation and bring their ideas to the table. In 2D or 3D, from home or work, beyond the confines of space and traditional computing, we can work together in ways we never thought possible. And unlock the power of our collective intelligence as we move from personal computing to the world's first collective computer. Welcome to the future of collaboration.
So that was another view of what the future might be like for this technology. Another one that's kind of close to my heart is immersion rooms. There are different concepts for how this might be, but generally it could involve at least 3 walls. Think about a standard size room, 11 by 11 or something, 10 by 12. That you have basically 3 walls covered with video. Could be 4 walls, it could be the walls and the ceiling, but anyway, it will involve either projectors projecting onto the respective walls, or it could actually be really big screen TVs, screens providing that. But here are some examples of it. They don't have to be boxes, they can also be circles, so you can have more of a circular view. But the idea is that instead of putting on VR glasses, you're immersed by a 3D physical projections or video on the walls. I say this was close to my heart. Whoops. Something out of order. Yeah, I'll come back to the one before. No, take it back. We're going to keep in order. Here's somebody's idea of immersive conference room using an immersive room, the same concept of projecting on multiple walls.
This is the Igloo Immersive Workspace. It's a technology-rich meeting space equipped with wraparound sound and vision that enables teams to collaborate more effectively and engage more intuitively with a full range of digital content and data. It's a perfect space for team meetings, group collaboration with remote workers, and fast-paced ideation sessions with agile switching between different software and websites. We want to make it easy for you to use the tools you already use. That's why we've integrated a whole host of industry-standard software into our immersive spaces. And using our 360 web browser, Igloo Web, many web-based applications simply work out of the box. Interacting with content in our immersive workspace is simple. It all runs from our easy-to-use interface called Igloo Home. It's like surrounding yourself with a supersized smartphone where all of your chosen apps, videos, and websites are available at a single tap. So if you know how to use a smartphone, you'll know how to operate an Igloo. The immersive workspace can be operated using Igloo Touch, our free smartphone app, which can also be used like a games controller when exploring 3D environments such as Unity and Unreal. And you can quickly switch between control devices, so there's no need for shared controllers. For more information on the Igloo Immersive Workspace, please visit igloovision.com.
So I mentioned that immersion rooms are close to my heart. ART84 and TFI projects have actually dabbled with this technology a bit with immersion rooms in a project called Geraldine's Place. And Geraldine was her full name was Geraldine Hickerson. She was a local artist that had this habit of painting her entire house with art, often inspired by the old masters. And it was a trailer house. This trailer house was destroyed, but unfortunately, but we wanted to recreate it using high-resolution photos that we had from the family, the Hickerson family, of the interior of the house. And what we had was a whole bunch of random photos, like on the left. And what we did was we looked at each of those photos and straightened them out, so to speak. We figured out where in the house they belonged, and we recreated each of 6 different rooms by taking those images and putting them onto 3 different screens. So each of these are 4 of the different rooms showing, each of these are 3 separate images. Each strip is 3 separate images, one for the left wall, one for the center wall, and one for the right wall. And these were projected in a 11 by 11 room where the audience could sit, at one end, and then we sort of immerse yourself in Geraldine's Place. and we would walk you through room by room with an audio track explaining where you were and telling you a little bit about Geraldine's. It didn't have any true interaction, but we did have, if you'll notice a little video I'm going to show of it, you'll see some animation of where something will be projected onto one of the windows. So this is a 1-minute kind of film of Geraldine's place, since we couldn't, unfortunately, build it in our current environment. Now I'm going to move to holographs, and because I'm a little bit behind, or a lot behind, I'm not going to show this particular video. It's not all that effective, but it describes a technology that Ericsson is using standard off-the-shelf technology for holograms, and where you see the hologram using either AR glasses or a screen. This is intended to be something that would be used with a mobile phone and go over a mobile network. So the idea here is not to recreate somebody, a full room in a holograph, but just to have a sort of vision of a person in your glasses, basically. And what was interesting to me about this was their attempts to compress the video. They have basically, the raw video for what they're looking at here is 2 gigabits per second, and they're trying to compress it down to 30 to 50 megabits per second to get it down to something that would go easily over the 5G network. But it gives you a good idea for something very simply holographic that we can, again, are sort of at gigabit type speeds without a lot of compression. In fact, their idea to get it from 2 gigabits per second to 30 or so megabits 30 to 50 megabits per second, it involves some network resources as well. So that's another idea of communications. This is another one idea that was shown at CES a couple, like last year at CES, where they have a hologram of an entire person, and you can basically pretend like you're meeting the person in real life. There's a video here, but again, I don't think it's worth taking the time for. And some of this technology has, standalone devices like here. This is another company. I used this quote last year. I think I'll just say it again. So we believe that the interfaces of the future won't be worn in your head 16 hours a day. Pretty much what Augie says and what I think. They will be more like campfires, glowing with 3-dimensional fields of light that you can gather around with others, sometimes in the same room, sometimes a world apart. So this is a whole other vision of visualization, if you will, using holographs together. And this is another company's idea of a virtual conference room and what a holographic meeting might be like.
We have stayed true to our vision. And now, the most profound pivot point in our industry is going to change everything. DVE's Immersion Room, holographic images of people that are stunningly realistic. And we have now fully integrated the latest Microsoft technology and applications into this award-winning space. A Surface Pro and Connect are offering new possibilities for navigating, with tiles floating in open air. Collaboration is now freed from the confines of a TV frame, and the whiteboard is now transformed into a crystal clear, bright, transparent board. Your drawings floating in midair. PowerPoint. It has never been seen like this before. Interacting with solid 3D objects floating before you. No special effects. All PowerPoint. Reimagined.
Okay, so you get the idea. Now we're talking about holograms, a meeting room. I don't have a version of this to show you that's actually a 3D immersion room with the holograms as well, but I'm sure that that will come as well. So this is, the question then is, now we have a high resolution holographic screen, maybe filling an entire wall or something, and what kind of data rates are required by this? So one paper I looked at is shown here. It says that basically the bandwidth requirement will be in the range of 100 gigabits per second to 1 terabit per second. And then they make the point that, well, that's really fast, we need to compress that. So they talk about compressing that maybe by a factor of a 50 to 1 or 100 to 1. And when you get that, you get down to from 100 gigabits to a terabyte to translate that into 5G or 20G. So now we're talking about, again, maybe 10 gigabits being enough, but maybe need even the next generation of multi 10 gigabit above, where we might need 20G instead of just this 10G. And I did my own calculation on this using the math that we talked about before. If we have a 4K hologram, and this is where depth comes in. To do the hologram, you need to take multiple angles of the same scene. So that if I'm trying to get Charlie's face, I can't just take it from here, but I also got to take it from here, here, and here, and up here. And we did it multiple times so that we can create a 3D image of Charlie. And the same for everybody else. So now we have this, not only do we have these other factors, we also have depth involved. And that's what, and that for holograph, that's typically 24. So we got to multiply everything by 24 to get the 3D. So 3D with the glasses is basically multiplied by 2, because you have a left and a right. Here we need, to do 3D hologram, we need 24 different shots. So that makes the multiplication pretty ugly. So that even with 4K in one lens, we get 287 gigabits per second. Compress that at 100, we're up to 3 gigabits. So now we're in multi-gig territory. If you want 8K, like we think we're going to be, and probably is going to be needed for this type of immersion room type thing, we're at 12 gigabits per second. Now suppose we want to do that, to have a hologram, but also have 360 view. So in other words, like we said before, you go all the way around and have the telepresence where you can not only see hologram to go around. Then it requires us to have multiple lenses. So you multiply these last two rows is multiplying by 6. So for a really high definition, 8K holographic experience that's 360 and immersive, what would you need? You would need probably with 100 compression ratio about 70 gigabits per second. So I can envision a technology that might actually come, maybe not in 2030, but sometime in the future, that would be cool, does not involve having to wear a headset, that would be immersive, that would need more than 10 gigabits per second, and would put us firmly into the future generations. Okay. Now, in all of this, I should say, I don't know, this is what we call a technology choice problem. We don't know yet which of these technologies are going to dominate, and it's hard for any one of us individually to determine because we're all coming from our own place. And a gamer might much prefer Zuckerberg's vision of the world, where I'm very much, probably a lot of us are, more like the interactive people side of things, and might like the immersion rooms more. And maybe the holographs don't take off, but if they do, then, and some people think they should, they probably are talking about some high data rates. So I can definitely see, and this is where I kind of got my conclusion yesterday, is that we know it's technically feasible to have these rates. And here's one case where don't know exactly how it's going to turn out, where it would be useful, and it would require 10 gigabits per second for sure. So the next generation, I think, is a for sure. But after that, it's an open question. Who knows? I think definitely if we go to holograms, we'll be seeing generations beyond that. So we don't really have time for questions, but we do have time for one or two anyway. So.
Well, we'll try.
We need to have a mic, though.
Have any of these technologies actually shown to be economically viable so far?
The meeting room technologies are available for international corporations in the corporate world of video conferencing, where they have very high bandwidth connections.
But I mean, do they make money, or is there a big demand for it? I guess is what
I don't
I'm
think
asking.
we're there yet. I don't think we're there yet. I do know from a technology perspective, the simple immersion room that I showed with Geraldine's place, is three. I mean, this one was one of the projectors we use. Down there is one of the projectors we use, and we have one just like it. And those are just basically, they're not even 4K projectors or HD projectors. And it was nice with HD, it would have been better with 4K, but it definitely was something that was affordable for us to do. And I could easily see incorporating some of this technology economically with a conference like this, including having a 3D camera here, including having a holograph of me, for example, and making it all work economically with things that would be within our reach. But putting that together in a package that's commercial, I don't know if anybody's be there yet. It's all in the early stages. But we need a bandwidth.
I wanted to ask about the hologram thing. Is that no matter how many people are in the room, it takes that bandwidth, or is that for one person or two people?
That's taking a video of a scene, however big it is. So I guess it could be multiple people. My guess is the bigger, the wider it is, the less holograph effect you get. But it's still there. We had now you don't see it anymore. I saw a question about whether Geraldine's place had audio. We had some real decisions to make about that. My first vision was to make it very interactive, where you could control interactively which rooms you were in, and then put up video. We pull up various multimedia things. We ended up going with much more like a movie concept or a narrative concept, a storytelling concept, where we just led you through the rooms and had a audio track explaining where you were. So yes, we did have audio.
What were the projectors in her immersion video? Were they on the ceiling?
Yeah, we had, imagine an 11 by 11 room. We had one, it was not hanging from the ceiling, it was actually from a platform, but it was at ceiling height. One there going this way, one there going this way, one going that way. It lacked one immersive quality, that if you stood in the middle of the room, your shadow, you would cause shadows. But if you were sitting down here, you were fine. We would have had to use back light lit screens to avoid that problem. That required a bigger room. So what I came away with was that if you could devote a room to that, either in an office space or your house, you can set up economically, if you have money, but you don't have to be rich, a pretty nice immersion room, and within the bandwidth capabilities of most of our just broadband speeds we have now. We do, Mike.
I was just curious if it's possible to make it portable and compact, maybe something smaller, because I imagine you would have to have bare walls, maybe, kind of like a poster board spread out.
Yes. And I've seen lots of concepts of that. Like, you've seen people do gaming setups where they just have like three screens, big TVs, and there's also some where you have a circular screen that's about this big, and then you kind of can sit in the middle of that. So there are various, and then there's the idea of having it on your phone as opposed to standalone camera. So there are lots of ways to mix and match these things, and who knows what's going to come out.